So whenever you are ready.
All right, by a show of hands, how many of you guys do know what GMO foods are? Okay, look around, that's 2 people. Do you know that you consume GMO foods every single day in most meals? Now, what is a GMO? A GMO is a genetically modified organism that's originally manufactured in a lab, and where this process starts from, like for corn, for instance, corn is like the biggest manufactured product, and so scientists have gained the ability to take genes from one organism and implant it into the genes of corn. So corn now produces its own pesticide. Corn is resistant to Roundup and other pesticides, and so now large commercial farmers, they spray Roundup and tons of gallons of pesticides on their plants, and it kills the weeds and the bugs, but it doesn't kill the corn. Now the real question is, we are consuming those pesticides. How much of those pesticides are getting into the corn? And corn, and it's not corn, soy is another huge manufacturer, and corn now has the ability to produce its own pesticides. So when someone eats corn and it goes down to your stomach, the bacteria in your stomach that helps digest food, whatever, it's now, the genes from the corn are now modifying the bacteria in your stomach to produce its own pesticides, unknowingly. And so this is like a big problem, because obviously most people don't know what GMOs are, but you consume them every day. High fructose corn syrup, which is in like almost everything. Corn syrup, canola oil, vegetable, everything. You'll find some variety or some form of corn in most foods. GMOs, okay, because large seed corporations that manufacture the corn, they have patented seeds. And this is like morally and unethical, because you can't patent for own nature. That's not for like us to do. And so several animal studies conducted by toxologist in France has concluded that he's fed lab rats this genetically modified corn and tomatoes and potatoes, and over the course of 2 years, during the first year of just consuming corn and all these GMO foods, they've had breast tumors, they've had massive gastrointestinal bleeding due to ulcers, and this is about half their life. So you can equivalent that to half of our lives, because GMO foods have really been introduced in our food system in the last 15 years, and that's when it's like, so we haven't hit our halfway mark, so it's not, we haven't been able to see the human side effects of it yet, except for the fact that the bacteria in our stomach has been modified. Some of these health problems in farm animals are not limited to infertility, accelerated aging, insulin regulation, changes in major organs and gastrointestinal systems. And does anybody know also about the 1989 GMO epidemic outbreak? Okay. Well, in early 1980s, there was this product called L-tryptophan, and it was produced by a massive company in Japan. And Japan wanted to make the product more efficient and produce more of it in a shorter amount of time, so they genetically modified it. And they shipped it to the States. And so all these people were eating and consuming L-tryptophan pills because it's like a nutrient pill. And so cases started showing up with massive hair loss, memory loss, and like all these other symptoms. And people were like, well, this is a new disease, we don't know what this is. And they traced it because it was happening not just in one state in particular, but all over the country. And so a whole bunch of doctors and their colleagues got together and studied it and traced it back to Japan. And there was over 100 people who had died from L-tryptophan. 5,000 to 10,000 people were affected by the illness. And so and then eventually the genetically modified L-tryptophan was then banned from America for a number of years back now. But this just goes to show that we've tried GMOs before in history, but they've already had a negative health effect, so we should just continue that. And so in conclusion, the use of GMOs they're unethical. Like, we should not be genetically modifying foods, we should not be engineering them, we should not be owning them or suing people because they're using a corn seed. That doesn't make much sense. So it's just, that's it.
All right, Jasmine, what did you think?
Overall, I thought it was pretty good. He started out with a good attention catcher. It got us all involved in the answers to the Brazilian earlier. Some things that I caught that he could improve on were he used a lot of ums or like or something. He didn't use his notes as much, which was good. He did refer to them, but he wasn't holding everything or anything, just constantly looking at them. It was very factual too. He had a lot of facts in it, studies. I believe he had memory in there too, so that's good. And then, one thing that you can improve on is the organization. It's kind of confusing the way it was organized. I mean, it was still easy to follow, but I think he could have organized it a little bit better. But overall, I thought it was pretty informative.
All right, but it's supposed to be persuasive, so. All right. I like the idea of the attention device and the kind of audience survey thing that you're doing, but you need to project your voice a little bit more. And I'm sorry, there's a little echo in the room, and I'm older. My hearing is still pretty good, though. I couldn't make out what you were talking about. I didn't hear GMO the first 3 times you said it. You weren't quite mumbling, but you were low enough that it wasn't clear. Once I heard what you were talking about, I said, oh, everything that you were doing made sense, but I had to kind of go back through that and process it myself. And that's just a delivery confidence sort of thing at the beginning. You got to be a little bit more forceful as a personality when you're going through that process, especially at the beginning of the speech, to give yourself some credibility. I do think that you found a couple of value issues to apply to it. A lot of your argument is really about the dangers of GMO, that there's an ethical consequence to those dangers. I think that you need to get more involved with that. For instance, are we being given these things without our knowledge? that's potentially a value argument, that we are being given material and we're consuming it and we are uninformed about it and it's hidden from us. There's something unethical or immoral about that. I can see that. The argument that you make about the seeds and the patenting, I think there's a good value argument there. It needs to be developed a little bit more. I'm going to disagree with Jasmine a little bit because I thought that you had some ideas that were good ideas for the argument, but I didn't think the proof was very strong on them. The best proof that you had was you had two things that I thought stood out. One was the reference to the French research that was being done, but it's a vague reference. You need a source citation, and I'm sure that there was some statistical information that came from the original study. Otherwise, it sounds a little bit vague. Some French guys found rats developed this problem after a period of time, and went, really? Who are these guys? What's the institution they're affiliated with? How likely is it that that problem's coming up? You need to sell that information a little bit more. And then there was a lot of uncertainty about the example that you had from the Japanese, was it tryptophan or that sort of thing. To me, the way it came across is it sounded like it was like not something that was in people's food, but it was like a medicine that people were taking, and that caused these kinds of problems. Well, that's a completely separate kind of issue, that there's a problem with that medication, that it produced these results. There's also a little bit of inconsistency because at one point you're arguing, the half-life of this, like with the animal research, it's a few years, so we've only been doing this for 15 years, we're just beginning to get to the half-life of this, but then this stuff produces the results almost immediately. How can that be consistent? I think you're talking about a couple of different things here that both involve genetic modification, but they may not involve the same kind of thing, and that needed to be more clear. You needed a source citation on that as well. I will agree with her, though, it needs to be a little bit better organized. I do think that you did a pretty good job delivering it, except for the fact that your voice is a little quiet sometimes, and that's, like I said, partially the room, and maybe you're just a naturally quiet kind of guy. That happens too, but you do need to project a little bit more. I did notice a couple times that you had to look over and turn sideways to get to the information. I like the idea of having it down at your side, but it should be something that you just glance at, not turn your whole body away from the audience to look at. I think that was a bit problematic. All right, thank you very much.